Buenas tardes a todos, ¿qué tal estáis? Bienvenidos a esta sesión tan especial del Congreso, del cuarto Congreso de la Sociedad Científicos Católicos. Para los que no me conozcáis, here you can see Dr. Long. I am Verónica Fernández, soy Verónica Fernández, coordinadora del grupo de ¿Así? ¿Así mejor? ¿Más lejos? Es que tengo un bozarrón que... coordinadora del grupo de experiencias cercanas a la muerte, milagros, exorcismos y muchas otras cosas interesantísimas. Y tenemos el placer y el honor de estar en este congreso, concretamente hospedando una sesión que esperamos que os guste mucho, porque como veis nuestro grupo es muy heterogéneo, milagros, ECM, exorcismos, y dijimos, ¿de qué sesión podemos hablar? Y al final ganó por votación las experiencias cercanas a la muerte. Esperamos que esta sesión os guste mucho, a nosotros nos encanta porque además tenemos unos invitados de excepción y vamos a empezar con el primer invitado, que es el doctor Jeffrey Long, que lo tenéis aquí en la pantalla. Antes de nada, avisaros, el doctor Jeffrey Long es estadounidense, es médico, oncólogo, radiólogo, nos va a hacer su charla en inglés, espero que no haya problemas, ¿de acuerdo? Sus slides en PowerPoint están todas anotadas, yo creo que lo podéis seguir bien, ¿vale? ¿Hay algún problema en la sala? ¿No? I think English is okay, Dr. Long, for today.
Okay.
So, as I said, I'm going to switch to English. We have the pleasure to host this session, starting with a conference by Dr. Jeffrey Long. Jeffrey Long is a radiation oncologist who lives in the United States, and he, like 25, 30 years ago, he founded the Near-Death Experience Foundation, which is a website, but much more than this. It's the organization that hosts right now, I think it's that has the largest collection of near-death experiences in the whole world. Am I right, Dr. Long?
That is correct.
It's like 4,000. They have like 4,000 or more near-death experiences recorded in the web. So today, Dr. Long will talk us about the last findings on scientific studies regarding near-death experiences. So, Dr. Long, whenever you want, we are going to share your presentation.
Okay, proceed with sharing the presentation.
Yes, I'm going.
So I want to thank you, the organizers, for the opportunity to talk today, and certainly everybody who's in the audience today. Thank you for your interest. We're going to go through this fairly quickly. There's a lot of things to discuss, but there's a great deal about near-death experiences that inform our understanding of consciousness. We'll be talking about that with an emphasis on the evidence that underlies the reality of near-death experiences. And there's my research website right there. Next slide. What we're going to be sharing is quite remarkable, so please keep in mind that several years ago there was a billionaire named Bigelow, and he put out an essay contest. So all around the world, people submitted 25,000 word essays, or over 1,000 contest entries. There was a panel of knowledgeable judges that selected what you're going to be hearing today. So please understand that while what I'm presenting is remarkable, this was selected as perhaps among the most stringent scholarly peer review possible. I was in the runner-up winning group. I actually won $50,000 for this essay and a lot of the information and studies I'll be presenting today. So out of the over 1,000 contest entries for this huge contest, near-death experience, which I'll be talking about today, was the most common essay topic. The results from my essay and actually an expansion on it will be presented. This is original research, and I believe some of the strongest scientific evidence for life after death. Next slide. So what exactly is a near-death experience? You're so near death, as the name implies, that you're so physically compromised, you're unconscious or maybe clinically dead. Now, at that time, there should be no remembrance of that period when you're unconscious, and yet people do. And that is the experience part of a near-death experience, which we'll be talking about. While no two near-death experiences are the same, there's a very consistently observed pattern of elements, not only in my research, but also basically all other near-death experience researchers are seeing the same thing. And we'll be addressing some of those elements or what occurs during a near-death experience in our talk today. Next slide. So there's over 25 years of research underlie what I'll be presenting today. The website URL, my research website, is up there. It's a public service. We don't have anything for sale there. This is literally a labor of love, with over 4,000 full text near-death experiences posted on the website. Please bear in mind throughout my talk today that a basic science principle is what is real is consistently observed, and we're seeing overwhelming consistency in what I'll be sharing today. Special thanks to my wife, Jody, who's the webmaster and whose heroic efforts in maintaining the website and expanding it to over 30 different languages has allowed this research to be available for my discussion today. Next slide. So who has near-death experiences? Well, in the United States in 1981, there was published a Gallup poll who found perhaps as many as 5% of people who've have had a near-death experience. We cannot predict at the time of a life-threatening event who will have a near-death experience or exactly what the content will be. Near-death experiences happen to children and adults, physicians and scientists, clergy, religious, atheists, and even those who have never heard of near-death experience and can't believe such a thing could happen. Everyone can possibly have a near-death experience. About 10 to 20% of people who nearly die have a near-death experience. Bottom line, anyone can have an NDE at any point in their life. Next slide. Well, again, what I'll be saying may be remarkable. Please understand that there's literally hundreds of prior scholarly articles in the leading medical and scientific journals, and the major findings of what I'll be talking about today have been corroborated, typically with smaller research, but throughout the literally over 50 years that near-death experience has been known. And again, certainly corroborated in that prior essay contest I've talked about. So I'm certainly not alone in my research or in these findings. Next slide. So how can we be confident that near-death experiences, and I may abbreviate it, NDEs, are for real? Well, for one thing, understand that a common precipitating event of near-death experiences is cardiac arrest, or your heart stops. Well, immediately when you have a cardiac arrest, blood immediately stops flowing to the brain. 10 to 20 seconds after cardiac arrest, the EEG electroencephalogram measuring the cortical electrical brain activity goes absolutely flat, and that's been observed in many studies. In my study of 984 NDEs, I asked them point blank, how did your highest level of consciousness and alertness during the experience compared to your normal everyday consciousness and alertness? So amazingly, even though they are clinically unconscious or dead, over 3/4 said that during their near-death experience, their level of consciousness and alertness was higher than normal. A little under 20% said that it was simply normal, and less than 5% described less consciousness and alertness during their NDE, even while clinically unconscious or dead. Next slide. A common initial event occurring in about 45% of near-death experiences is what we call an out-of-body experience or observation of ongoing earthly events. So this lends itself to scientific investigation. Is it real? Is what they're seeing while they're bodily unconscious or clinically dead in that consciousness typically above their body, seeing and hearing things? Well, there were two prospective studies by Dr. Sabom and Sartori that found what they were seeing seemed to be absolutely real, even down to the finest detail. There's a Dr. Holden who did a literature review of near-death experiences, and over 100 reviewed. 92% of these out-of-body observations, and previously published in scholarly peer-reviewed journals, was without any inaccuracy whatsoever. The NDERF, my NDERF website, I conducted a study of 287 of these out-of-body observations of ongoing earthly events during near-death experiences, and by my review, nearly 98% of the time, these observations were without any inaccuracy whatsoever of ongoing earthly events. And this includes scores and scores of near-death experiences that describe these out-of-body observations geographically far from the physical body. I mean, city blocks away, even over a mile away. When people are in that out-of-body state during their NDEs, what they see, what they hear, if they check it out later, is accurate down to the finest details. On the nderf.org website, you can actually use an AI-fueled search for these out-of-body observations, and there are at least 700 NDEs posted on our website that describe these out-of-body observations. So this is not a small number, it's not anecdotal, this is literally the pattern of near-death experiences in what we have on our website and previously posted by many, many other researchers. Next slide. Another interesting thing is that people that have near-death experiences, even if they're visually impaired or even blind, including those born totally blind from birth, when they have near-death experiences, they invariably have vision in their near-death experience. These are typical near-death experiences, but they include visual awareness, even if they were blind. Next slide. Let's see an example of that. Marta described this at the age of 5, interestingly. I breathed in, this is a near-death experience shared with our website. I breathed in the lake water and promptly lost consciousness. I was pulled out by a beautiful woman who was dressed in bright white light. She looked into my eyes and asked me what I wanted. I was completely satisfied and at first could think of nothing. Finally, it occurred to me that I wanted to take a trip around the lake. In my journey, I saw detail I would never have been able to see in real life. By simply intending, I could go anywhere, even to the tops of trees. I was legally blind. For the first time, I could see leaves on trees, birds' feathers, bird's eyes, details on telephone poles, and in people's backyard that was far more clear than 20/20 vision. Again, with her first observation of what we would consider to be mundane things, birds' feathers, telephone poles, absolutely fascinating to Marta at age 5 during her near-death experience. Next slide. Now, there are, of course, over 30 different skeptical explanations of near-death experience that believe near-death experiences are brain-based. And I've heard it all, a wide variety of physiological, psychological, and cultural skeptical explanations. And the reason that there are over 30 different skeptical explanation or brain-based explanations of near-death experience is very simple. The skeptics themselves, as a group, simply cannot agree on any one or more of these brain-based explanations of near-death experience that they accept collectively as adequately explaining near-death experience. Skeptics can't explain anything we're talking about today, let alone the totality of evidence. Next slide. Another important, interesting thing is near-death experiences that occur during general anesthesia. During general anesthesia, during operations, of course, heart and breathing function is very carefully monitored. When the heart stops, you should have no conscious experience, and when you're under general anesthesia, it should be no conscious remembrance possible. I studied 23 near-death experiences that occurred during during general anesthesia. They absolutely do occur, and the content is absolutely typical of NDEs occurring under all other times. In the survey I had at this time, there were 33 elements, characteristics, if you will, what happens during near-death experiences. There was no statistical difference between the survey responses to what happens during a near-death experience among the group that was under anesthesia at the time compared to all other near-death experiences under all other circumstances. The only difference was tunnel. People having their near-death experience while under general anesthesia had statistically likely more tunnel experiences. I don't know why, but the bottom line is the critical survey question asking about the level of consciousness and alertness, no difference between the two groups. Even general anesthesia did not in any way seem to diminish that level of consciousness and alertness during a near-death experience. Further evidence that it cannot possibly, near-death experiences that is, be due to physical brain function. Next slide. Life review is a fascinating thing that happens in about 14, perhaps as high as 20% of near-death experiences. So what happens? Well, during a life review, even though they're physically, bodily unconscious or clinically dead, they review a part or even all of their prior life, which is a vivid example of the acceleration of consciousness typically described during near-death experiences. So in my study, I looked at 88 of these life reviews, and my research question was, is there any reason to doubt the reality of what they saw during their prior life, either by my review or by as described by the near-death experiencers. Result is what we call perfect playback. There didn't seem to be any hallucinatory or false memories during life reviews, and in fact, forgotten memories, very typically described as while they were toddlers, even if they had long forgotten that, if they checked with their parents, what they had long forgotten was later verified. Again, extraordinary acceleration of consciousness during near-death experiences. I always say this when I give this, fear not the life review. When a life review occurs, there's essentially never an external judgment going on by other beings. The near-death experiencer may certainly have some perspectives or self-awareness or judgment about what they see, but bottom line is the life review is a learning tool, very transformative and not to be feared. Next slide. What I call family reunion is encounters with deceased loved ones during near-death experiences. This is a common, maybe 15% of people encounter people they knew in their earthly life that are deceased. This typically happens during a near-death experience while they're in an unearthly, or if you will, heavenly realm. I studied 84 of these encounters with deceased beings that they knew in their earthly life. These are essentially always joyous reunions, notably when they encounter a being that they knew during their life, only 4% were alive at the time of the near-death experience. 96% were deceased. And that was, by the way, the same percentage that Dr. Kelly did in an equivalently large study. Now, in these encounters with people they knew in their earthly life, there have often been described surprise encounters. They may be relatives or even siblings, brothers or sisters that they never met. This happens in childhood near-death experiences. Parents are heartbroken when they have a young child die, and they may not tell their child until they believe they're old enough to understand death, maybe about 10 to 12 years old. So we have a small series of near-death experiences where children encounter a brother or sister they never met before, never knew existed. And when they tell their shocked parents what they encountered, invariably the parents will say, yes, you really did have a brother or sister that died. If it was a boy or a girl that they encountered in their near-death experience, gender is invariably correct. Even people that they don't even know are dead may be encountered, and then they find out after their near-death experience were deceased at the time. Deceased pets also described, you name it, dogs, cats, horses, birds, many deceased pets are also encountered during near-death experience. Again, joyous reunions. There is a preponderance of genetic relatives. Next slide. Interestingly, near-death experiences in children are an important study for consciousness, or if you will, the reality of near-death experience also. I present in this slide 26 NDEs. I actually recently updated this data. I don't have a slide ready, of 53 near-death experiences. The study group was very young children, age 5 and less, the average and median age being 3.5 years old. The reason this is a somewhat ideal study group is that they're very young children of this age are practically a cultural blank slate. They almost certainly do not have well-formed religious beliefs. They almost certainly don't conceptualize what death is like, and almost certainly have never heard of near-death experience. What I found in my study and in this updated larger study, bottom line, the content, what occurs during the near-death experience, strikingly similar whether you're age 5 or younger or over children and adults, again, using chi-square statistics comparing both groups and responses to the same survey. Dr. Sutherland reviewed the literature on childhood near-death experiences. Her conclusion corroborates age does not in any way seem to affect the content of near-death experiences. Next slide. Remarkably, there's worldwide consistency. This year at our annual, I'll call it IONS or Near-Death Experience conference, I presented an update on this. This was when I presented at the largest near-death experience cross-cultural study ever reported. Once again, near-death experience strikingly similar wherever in the world it occurs and in whatever language they share it with our nderf.org website, posted in over 30 different languages with the translated survey, so people can literally compare or share their near-death experiences, and we can investigate their survey question responses. Interestingly, in my research, we had 51 non-Western near-death experiences that were shared on the English version of our survey so that we were able to directly compare that group of non-Western near-death experiences with the same group of people that shared in English in typical Western countries. And once again, remarkably, the content of the near-death experience is strikingly similar anywhere on the world, Western or non-Western. Again, further strong evidence that near-death experiences are not culturally or religious belief determined. Next slide. After effects are what we call the typical and common changes in lives, in values and beliefs that people have after a near-death experience. After a near-death experience, there's typically substantial changes in values and beliefs. They actually increase in intensity over literally years to decades. There's an increased belief in the afterlife, no surprise there. Near-death experiencers believe they know what's beyond death's door because they experienced it themselves. Again, they have a reduced fear of death. They have increased value of loving, compassionate relationships, less materialistic, an increased belief in God. And actually, there's a reference down below to the largest study of after effects that have been published to date that I published last year. Again, we found striking, literally orders of magnitude increased in these values and beliefs that we just discussed, and a number of others. And interestingly, in that study, we had a group of 42 people that shared on our website survey, but did not have an near-death experience. They simply had a life-threatening event, and we found tremendous statistical difference in their life changes of people who simply had a life-threatening event without a near-death experience to those that had the life-threatening event with a near-death experience. Again, further strong evidence that these very powerful changes or after effects are due to the actual near-death experience content itself. Next slide. This is just a busy slide, but this is an example of the increase in the belief of meaning of life following a near-death experience. We asked them about before their experience at the top and at the current time when they had their near-death experience and shared it, median and average of about 15 years later. But I mean, wow, look at that jump in people that believe our earthly life is meaningful and significant. 27.5% before the near-death experience, 80% after the near-death experience. Just a brief illustrative example of how profound these changes in values and meaning are after NDEs. Next slide. Here's an interesting thing that happens. We have about 15 near-death experiences that were shared with us where 2 or more people simultaneously at the same time had a life-threatening event. During this experience, they were aware of each other. They were able to interact. They were both in a near-death experience realm. They actually do occur. They're typical near-death experiences, but share it. In this group of 15, one person was ultimately resuscitated and survived and shared it, while the other person went on and was permanently, irreversibly dead. Next slide will be a fascinating illustration of the concept of a shared near-death experience. Again, from our website, William M. Was in a car taking his girl to his parents' home in Welland, Canada. I fell asleep while driving. I then realized that we were out of our bodies and flying quickly upward while holding hands. We flew straight up for about a minute. We saw a park or countryside-like landscape. Suddenly, we encountered 4 creatures. 2 flanked each of us, and they began to separate us gently. They overwhelmed us with the feeling of the highest love and compassion, beyond anything we could experience on earth. We were feeling a divine love. Therefore, we did not resist their effort. I felt sort of like a baby in mother's arms, though it's difficult to describe accurately. 2 of the creatures moved her upward toward the distant landscape, and 2 more moved me back downward. I felt so much love, peace, and comfort that I wanted to protest and say, "No, please let me stay here." But I heard inwardly or psychically that I couldn't stay. Next, I saw my car in flames from about a quarter mile up above. I felt a falling sensation and awakened in the car. The front was on fire. I moved her, his fiancée, from leaning on me as she was when I fell asleep, knowing that her body was only an empty shell. I had left her above with the beings, and indeed, his fiancée was dead, had died in that car accident, and yet in their parting time together, it was a shared near-death experience. Next slide. Another interesting, important point is near-death experience real? Well, heck, ask 984 people who had a near-death experience, as I did in my survey. So how do you currently reveal the reality of your experience? Look at that, just about 94% of near-death experiencers from 984 surveyed felt their experience was definitely real. Under 5% felt probably real, under 2% believing it was either probably or definitely not real. And I would submit from this data, out of respect for people's ability to generally understand reality, if skeptics of near-death experience want to represent that these NDEs are not real, they, the skeptics, should be presenting strong evidence that NDEs are not real. As we've discussed, they can't begin to explain physical brain-based function for everything we're talking about today. Next slide. So here's the latest research, and this is actually where it gets fascinating. I'd start out by saying, is there afterlife consciousness? Does our consciousness survive physically bodily death? And the answer from the evidence that you've seen so far, I hope you will agree with my conclusion, is a resounding yes. So if there's that consciousness that exists beyond our physical earthly life, is there anything that can help inform us from near-death experiences? So next slide, let's take a closer look at that and look at some of the more common aspects. There's three major afterlife concepts. Well, there's actually a huge number of afterlife concepts in near-death experiences, but among the most common that we hear in NDE accounts, love, oneness, and God. Next slide. So let's go look at each one of those individually. Again, light, love, and God, we looked at 866 sequentially shared NDEs. Those were among the top three descriptive words that people having this experience use to describe it. Next slide. So the two most common words in NDEs, light and love. Next slide. Encountering information about love and NDEs is common. So I asked 984 people that had NDEs very directly. During your experience, did you encounter any specific information or awareness regarding love? Wow, look at that. 55% said yes. There was a text box response following this question, and that gave great insights into what information about love they had encountered. Next slide. So here's just a very small sampling of what NDEers have to say about that love they encountered during their experience. I knew that love was the greatest force around us and that we are all love, and love is the only thing that is real. Love was everywhere. It permeated the afterlife. It was incredible. Love is the root of all. It is the Alpha and Omega. I was loved unconditionally despite my faults and fears. I was loved and it was unconditional. But there at that URL below, you can see for yourself, that is a compilation of the hundreds of narrative responses to that question regarding love. And you can see that over and over for yourself, the amazing, remarkable consistency and unearthly descriptions of love. Next slide. Another common concept is connection or unity or oneness in NDEs. Next slide. So again, a survey of 984 near-death experiencers, I asked, during your experience, did you encounter any specific information or awareness that a mystical, universal connection or unity oneness either does or does not exist? I asked it in the binary form, does or does not, to satisfy skeptics who might believe that there was a leading question. The bottom line is, in the text box following this question, essentially everybody answering yes or responding yes, they encountered information that that universal connection or oneness does exist. But wow, once again, nearly half, hundreds of near-death experiencers stating that they were aware of that they encountered that during their near-death experience. Next slide. So let's see exactly what they mean when they answer yes to that. Again, straight from the narrative response to that question. I was aware of a oneness, a connection with God and all other souls, but also individuality. We are all pieces of a greater whole as I understand it. And getting back where we can all be together again is the ultimate going home. I felt a universal connection or unity, but it didn't really seem mystical at the time. It just felt like this is how it is. I'm going to say yes, because I felt a larger than universal oneness. I felt connected to everything and everyone on earth and across the universe. I felt as if anything I said or did had greater repercussions than I could ever realize. And finally, the oneness on the other side is amazing. You become one with all life. All is connected. All is one, and all is love. So again, literally see for yourself hundreds of these descriptions of mystical unity, the narrative responses to that survey question right there on that URL. Next slide. God is described in near-death experiences. Next slide. So let's drill down on that fascinating concept. So again, 984 into your survey. During your experience, did you encounter any specific information or awareness that God or a supreme being either does or does not exist? Again, asking it deliberately in binary form, does or does not, so that we would pull out if people got information that God doesn't exist. Well, again, in the text box narrative response following the question, essentially everybody that answered yes to that question, nearly half in this survey, were saying yes, they encountered information or awareness that God or a supreme being really does exist. Next slide. So let's find out what people say. Oh, well, here's an example. Take Sandy, another 5-year-old like Marta we presented earlier. In August of 1985, when I was only 5 years old, I was on a boat trip on a local lake. I was bitten by a mosquito and developed encephalitis. I died and drifted into a safe black void of comfort and ease, no pain and no fear. This was a place where I felt right at home. Off in the distance, I saw a very small light. It was drawing me to it. I felt myself rushing towards this light with a great amount of speed. I was not frightened. When I came into the light, it represented peace and joy, but most of all, a deep, unconditional love. The light was a sparkling, glowing cloud. From inside, I heard a voice in my head, and I knew it was God. Since my parents never discussed God or took me to church, I really don't know how I knew, but I did. Furthermore, I felt like this was my real home, this place where I was with this beautiful light, which was God. I felt surrounded by the light and was one with it. The feeling was like being scooped up and held by my daddy when a barking dog was biting me just a few months earlier, only much more so. Next slide. So here's again descriptions of God from narrative answers to that prior survey question. God is everything, energy, the fabric of everything. You know it is a supreme being by the all-encompassing love and warmth within and outside of you, all around you and through you in every part and in every moment. I did not believe in God before my experience. The presence of God, the forms in which God presented itself to me were undeniable. I wasn't just given information, I experienced the information, so I would absolutely know it to be true. 3 examples out of literally hundreds of descriptions of God in narrative responses to that prior survey question. Anyone in the world can go see for themselves at that URL below. Next slide. There's evidence of God's love in near-death experience. No human can ever love with the love I felt in that light. It's all-consuming, all-forgiving. Nothing matches it. It is like the day you looked into the eyes of your child for the first time, magnified a million times, indescribable. It wasn't just that I felt unbelievable love. I was unbelievable love. God is love, and that God was within me and all of us. I know that love is all there is, and God loves all of his children deeply and equally. There are no stepchildren in the family of God. We are all divine. God loves us all infinitely. And again, same URL with hundreds of descriptions of God in near-death experiences. Next slide. So in conclusion, many converging lines of evidence demonstrate the reality of near-death experiences. That they are real and cannot possibly be due to physical brain function. There is a very consistent message of the reality of a soul, if you will, that unearthly part of us that apparently survives physical bodily death with unearthly consciousness. Very powerful evidence for the reality of an afterlife. You draw on that strength again from multiple lines of evidence. Some of the key messages from my NDE research and those of many other researchers: Death is absolutely not the end. It is a new beginning. There is a beautiful afterlife filled with vastly expanded state of consciousness. We're all deeply connected, and love is the very foundation of the universe. And I would submit these are among the most profound and uplifting truths ever revealed to humanity. Thank you. Next slide. I'll now take some questions. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Long. Can you hear me? Thank you, Dr. Long, for this brilliant presentation and all the scientific facts that you displayed in your PPT. Is there any question in the room? There are many, so.
There usually are. That's okay.
That's good.
Hello, Dr. Long. Thank you so much for that talk and for all the evidence. Really very interesting research, I found. I was just wondering, though, I have to say I wasn't fully convinced by the evidence of the demonstrability of there being consciousness that survives brain death, just because, like how you mentioned under the case of life review, that there was this phenomenon of acceleration of consciousness. And then the only scenario where I kind of felt that it could be used to counteract this idea of like not having consciousness or having consciousness without brain activity would be the general anesthesia example. But could one just say that there could have been an acceleration of consciousness such that people weren't actually experiencing what was after death, but what was right at death's door when they were coming in or out of their near-death or their literal brain death?
I'm having a little trouble with the audio here. Could you, moderator,
sorry,
could you repeat
can you
that?
come here so that Dr. Long can see you?
Oh, sure. Okay.
If you don't mind. Because he cannot see you.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I can hear the question and respond to it as the question indicates. Okay, hi, there we go. Greetings.
Face to face.
I think
Hello.
question. So if we can just drill down on the question, please.
Yes. What exactly is the evidence that there is consciousness that survives brain death that you presented?
Yeah, right. A lot of that has to do with everything I presented here. Physically, from these accounts shared with me, they did not get scored as a near-death experience unless they were physically, bodily, unconscious at the time of their near-death experience. So given by the very dictionary definition of unconscious, no memory, these people had highly lucid, organized, detailed things that occur. So some of the strongest lines of evidence occurs in their observations of consciousness over their physical body, observing especially distant events, clearly indicating that consciousness can exist beyond the physical body. Near-death experiences under general anesthesia, again, often with that verified, validated out-of-body observation, very, very strong lines of evidence. Near-death experiences with normal and often supernormal vision in blind. So the whole list goes on and on. But I think maybe no one line of evidence is absolutely convincing, but I think if you look at the totality of evidence, you really, I think, even at a minimum would have to say there seems to be something going on that is not definitely explainable by physical earthly consciousness as we understand it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
To you. Are you?
Well, I would have a follow-up. I was just, I agree. I think that there is a lot of evidence there, and as as a Catholic and as a believer, I believe that the Lord uses these experiences in order to speak into people's lives and experiences. But I just, the skeptic in me just came out and said, it could be that it's not actually pointing to an experience that was had while they were unconscious and while they didn't have brain activity, and then instead what we were just witnessing is that sort of acceleration of consciousness that you mentioned with the life review that was occurring not necessarily beyond death, but right at death's door.
Okay, the question is, could these near-death experiences be due to the time when they are entering unconsciousness or exiting from unconsciousness around that life-threatening event? Exactly. When they have those out-of-body experiences and see their own physical body, they are not seeing themselves at the time they're either entering or exiting. That occurs essentially exclusively when they're aware of their unconscious or clinically dead body resuscitation by others going on. So there's really no significant lines of evidence in near-death experiences based on observations of their own physical body that it's occurring at a time entering to or departing from consciousness at the time of a life-threatening event. So that's, I hope, answers.
But, well, more my concern was like if that period was actually the period in which all of the conscious experience happened, that it was compressed, that it was like, you know, like how you might dream, and your dream is only in a certain like stage of your sleep as opposed to all throughout your sleep, but it might seem like it's occurred all throughout your sleep. And so maybe it's just at that transition point where you have all this conscious experience that makes it seem like, oh, go ahead.
There are literally hundreds of near-death experiences from my work and that have been published that when they have that out-of-body experience and observe their earthly physical body, if they corroborate it later with the doctors that were there at the scene, healthcare workers, electronic, EMS, emergency crew, that is time-stamped to the time that they are bodily, physically unconscious or clinically dead. And let's not forget near-death experiences under general anesthesia. No way is that going to be due to, entering the period prior to cardiac arrest or after. So out of many, two very strong lines of evidence that this is indeed consciousness occurring apart from the body when they are observably and verifiably unconscious or dead.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'll leave it to other people.
One
Thank you.
last
Yeah,
question,
okay.
please, for Dr. Long. Wait.
Yeah.
Do you have time for two small questions, Jeffrey?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. I'll stay here as long as you want. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yep. Here we go. Good. All right.
Hello, Dr. Long. Thank you very much for your intervention. It was really, really good. I'm also going to put myself in the place of a skeptic, and I thought of a possible critique to your conclusions, and I want to know how you answer. The idea is that you said that there was more or less a consistent idea of the afterlife and of God and of God is love and all of that throughout your research and the other research that was done. And even in cases like the testimony you showed where the participant was a 5-year-old and her parents didn't talk to her about God and she didn't go to church, so she couldn't possibly know that the idea of God being love and that was like something common. So my critique is that may have come, even if she didn't know, if she wasn't taught that may have come through cultural osmosis. So is your research and the rest of the research done mainly on American and Western countries where the idea of God and of the afterlife is more or less consistent, not only in church, but also in movies, in cartoons, in TV shows? Or is there research with participants of other cultures and where the idea of God might be different?
Yeah, good question. In the 5-year-old I gave, that is anecdotal that she became aware God is love. And I would be very skeptical, as you would be, of just a single anecdotal presentation. I can't share all 4,000 near-death experiences, and that's why I have that's why we had that link, so that you can see for yourself the literally hundreds and hundreds of people that believe that there's, they encountered God or encountered love and described that. So it was just literally a small sampling, and I did touch on briefly, I wish I had more time, but this year I presented 51 non-Western near-death experiences that completed the same version as people everywhere else in the world. They knew English well enough to complete the survey, but they were from non-Western countries, like literally all over. And of those 51, once again, strikingly similar results. We actually studied what I call those spiritual questions about oneness, God, love, and once again, we were able to compare those responses to those key questions with typical Western near-death experiencers, and we didn't find any statistical difference. So it literally doesn't seem to make any difference whether you're a Muslim in Egypt or Hindu in the United States or a Christian in America or even an atheist. Remarkably, encountering those types of insights from near-death experience seems to be very constant cross-culturally. And that's, again, why we have hundreds and hundreds posted publicly accessible on the website to help establish that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your intervention. And the last question, please, can you come along? And the last question is coming.
Okay.
Here she is.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm a 16-year-old student, actually, so this is a question that we were discussing the other day with our teachers, and it's about, well, infernal experiences, because we have heard that there's a minimum percentage of negative near-death experiences called infernal experiences, and I would really want to know if, are those even possible, and how would they work, the effects, and thank you so much for your talk.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, you all have great English. So about 2% of near-death experiences are objectively frightening, which I mean containing hellish type of imagery. And so while they're rare with that order of magnitude, they are certainly a real and seem to be actual near-death experiences. I have a long writing about that on my website. The bottom line is the people that have these types of near-death experiences often come back with the belief that they needed that especially frightening, even hellish experience so that they could confront issues in their life, guilt, anger, resentment, and have that, if you will, spiritual kick in the pants so that they could confront those issues and then ultimately grow and become more loving and positive people. So while these experiences do occur, it is my consensus, and actually the consensus of all other near-death experience researchers I know, that those should not be perceived on their face value as being a threat of a permanent involuntary hell. This just seems to be the product of a loving God who reaches out and helps people to be better people in a way that is specific for their particular needs.
Thank
So
you
good
very
question.
much. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you bet.
Thank you for your
Thank you so
intervention.
much.
Thank you.
So thank you, Jeffrey, for your intervention and for your talk. And just let's clap our hands before saying goodbye to Dr. Long. Thank you, Dr. Long.
Thank you. If anyone has any other questions, you can
sorry?
email me. Yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to email me at
Of course, we will do so.
nderf@nderf.org, and I'll be glad. So I know there's others. So
Okay.
Great audience, great questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you. Have a lovely day, Jeffrey.
Thanks.